you'll receive a copy from the UK events team once it's available. So on to what we're here to do. I'm really pleased we're having this discussion about online harassment and online welfare in higher education. In my role, I hear a lot from students and universities who are really concerned about this. Research shows us it's those groups who are already minoritised and discriminated against, whether that's LGBTQ+ students from an ethnic minority group or other characteristics, who are often exposed to online abuse the most. And the impact on victims in terms of their mental health is really stark and have a real impact on mental health, student studies and their sense of belonging at university. At UUK, we published guidance on tackling online harassment back in 2019. I was just looking at it yesterday and I noted comments about how difficult it could be to respond to this type of harassment, particularly when the online sphere was featuring increasingly in how students access their education. And that was back in 2019 before COVID. So I'm sure that since then, the problem has only compounded and become even more daunting. And I know there's a huge will and a huge desire in the sector to tackle it, but it's really difficult. The nature of online abuse and the fast moving nature of the digital world can make it really challenging for universities to respond to. And that's why I'm really pleased to be joined by our speakers, who I hope will be able to start sharing some useful insight into this topic. We only have 45 minutes today, so we can't hope to cover everything, but I hope it will be informative and touch on some key themes. Our speakers will now briefly introduce themselves and tell us why they're here today, and then we'll move on to discussion. So please do start sending in your questions through the Q&A. Just so we were also hoping to hear from Sana, student from Aston University, but unfortunately she's stuck on a train today, so not able to join us. But very pleased, Andy, if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. I'm Andy Phippen. I'm a professor of digital rights at Bournemouth University. We've all been asked to just provide a couple of minutes to lay out our position. I'm going to start by being a bit grumpy, I'm afraid, but don't worry, because Emma's then going to talk in more positive lights. I've worked with Emma for a long time in both the school and the university sector. And my reflection on this invite and this event was very much, well, the excellent Change in the Culture report came out in 2016. Emma and I get asked to do, a number of these sorts of things every year. And I get to the point where I go, well, when can we start moving the conversation on? There's a great deal of really good work going on in universities across the country, but I don't see a consistency in response, and we've just served an FOI on the entire sector, and we're not seeing massive numbers of senior managers with safeguarding responsibilities named and on boards and on senior teams and similar. And it seems to be people within universities doing this in spite of the steer from senior management or in spite of the steer from regulators, rather than getting support. One example, a fantastic member of staff in a university, online safety as her priority on a temporary contract, and being advised that maybe you should go for an ICT advisor role because it's permanent and it pays more money as well. So you've got someone who's passionate, enthusiastic, who's constantly banging her head against a brick wall in her own university. My view is very much that without a whole university approach, we're not going to move away from this enthusiast model. We know students are calling for this sort of thing. We spend a lot of time talking to students. But equally, Emma and I will do something, and then someone will go, "Can you come and talk to our university?" And we'll go, "Yeah, no worries." And then they'll go, "Oh, let me speak to my dean," and then we'll never hear from them again. It doesn't seem to be a priority for senior management, is basically what I'm saying. And I think that needs to change. The other thing I would urge the sector as a whole to do, both university and then more broadly, is can we stop surveying about this stuff, please? We know it's a problem. We know students are asking for support and help. We need to step away. It's kind of like, do we have a threshold for doing something about this? Surely if there is one student who's suffering online abuse, we should have the facilities in place to support them. If we don't have routes for disclosure, then students are not going to be able to get any support. And it just seems weird. We're constantly doing surveys as if we need to have permission to do this. I think we could learn a lot from the Ofsted work a couple of years ago about sexual harassment at schools, and which specifically says, don't wonder whether this is happening. Don't say, oh, well, maybe we should find out whether it's happening. Assume it is and put stuff in place to deal with it. And I will stop there, and Emma can talk more about what you can actually do.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you very much. And thanks, Andy. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Emma Bond. I am Pro Vice Chancellor for Research at the University of Suffolk, and I am a professor of socio-technical research. And as Andy said, we have worked together for a number of years, starting out in the up to 18 sphere, and then over into the university sector a few years ago, when my university at Suffolk applied for and was lucky to get some Catalyst funding to work on a digital civility project. Now, as Andy said, one of the frustrations I think in this sector is quite often universities are led by people who are really passionate, really enthusiastic about it in the field, but often there is a lack of understanding across senior leadership. I was very lucky at the University of Suffolk, have a really, really supportive senior leadership team who supported our application to the Catalyst Fund, but then were really supportive about us as a university working with our students, working with our whole community to tackle this. And that for us is something that worked. And we learned a lot of lessons over the year that we had the funding. In terms of what we did, the first thing that I would say was we set out to raise awareness amongst our students and our staff about all sorts of natures around online abuse, online harassment, but also online safeguarding. So the first thing that we did was we worked with a charitable organisation who came in, and we gave training to all our staff about how to handle disclosures. So before raising awareness and encouraging students to come forward, we wanted to make sure that any students that came forward with a disclosure was really, really appropriately supported and responded to. And we had everything in place before we did that. So that was one of the first things that we did. We also, there's a real frustration, I think, across the sector about the very unhelpful term of digital natives, this assumption that students come into universities well prepared to learn digitally, but also live in a digital life, because we think that that's what they are. We've got to stop doing this. There's a huge digital diversity out there, not only of students' experience, but also their use of media. They may have experienced risk, before they come to university, which may actually have given them some resilience, or may not have done. So we have to really understand that. And we also know that the sort of education that they've had around how to report is really ad hoc. Some of, if they're lucky, have probably seen a CEOP video in an assembly, and others have had nothing at all. So we've got to stop that assumption that they join us at university knowing what to do, or knowing even how to recognise it when it happens to them. We worked with a lot of different organisations, and really lucky. We have worked with the Revenge Porn Helpline, we've worked with the Internet Watch Foundation, and we drew on that experience, and we were really lucky that they also supported us. And they came in, they did workshops for our students. We had resources, we had videos going on as students lined up, to go into lectures. We had posters on the back of toilet doors. And we also had staff that could pick up the conversations. So if students had seen something about, actually, there is an image of me out there, we had staff that could then appropriately support them, not just specialist staff, but everybody could have that conversation. We also tackled some really quite tricky issues. And that, I think, is something that universities really shy away from. Students come to us aged 19, 20 with images on their phone of 14, 15-year-olds, which are illegal. How do they know how to get them safely removed? So we had the Internet Watch Foundation in, who talked to our students about that. How do you report? How do you get images really safely removed? And we tackled it one at a time. So we had the project for a year, and we tackled 10 different themes. So image-based abuse, hate crime, hate speech, indecent images. If you're watching pornography, how do you know if that pornography is legal or illegal? So lots of quite challenging conversations, perhaps, but it was actually really effective. And one of the other things that we did was we evaluated, what we had done. And we really had quite a transformational culture around that. Our students were much more aware, they were much more confident about how to report, much more confident about what to do if they felt that they were a bystander in these situations. So I think the lessons learned from it was it's got to be a whole university approach, from senior leaders right the way down to our support staff. We had course administrators who came forward for the training and said, I deal with mitigating circumstances. If a student's being bullied or abused online, they don't want to come in, they don't want to engage. And from that, which I'm sure Andy will also talk about a bit more, we produced a toolkit for universities, which was specifically about how they could self-review their online safeguarding. We updated it last year with the statement of expectations, after this statement of expectations had been out for a year. And I think if universities do nothing else, pull out your response to the statement of expectations from the OFS. Does it really explicitly cover online? And if not, why not? Thank you.
Great. Thank you. That's really helpful. I think a lot of points that we can get into a bit more in the discussion. Thank you. Vicky, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. So my name is Vicky Bars. I'm the head of culture transformation at Culture Shift. I use she, they pronouns. And I've been an equality, diversity and inclusion practitioner in higher education for the last 15 years before I moved to Culture Shift, working at a variety of different universities and the National Union of Students. And I've worked on a variety of different sort of harm prevention change programs. I have gone through and implemented many of the recommendations in the toolkit that Andy and Sarah have made. So I've like firsthand sort of tried and tested that in an institution, and it's really helpful, and I think it's really important to highlight actually that there is already so much good knowledge and information out there, and it's just about organizations giving the resource to actually implementing those ideas. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. It's about doing the things that you've already been told will work and have been evidence-based and attested. And so, yeah, a little bit about Culture Shift, I guess. We're a tech for good company. You might have heard of our report and support platform. And we work with 90 partners, reaching nearly 2 million students and employees. And obviously having an online reporting tool is probably why we were invited to come and speak today. So I want to talk a bit about why I think it's really important to have a tool that meets people where their harassment is taking place, where their harms are taking place. People, you know, our lives wouldn't, I think Emma was right there in saying that, you know, we aren't all the same level of digital natives, and not everyone has the same level of digital experience, but we have experienced the last few years of existing in an online space so much more intensely than we ever have before. And so being able to have multiple options, including online ones, is really necessary. I also wanted to touch a bit on some of the barriers that people face to reporting. A lot of people fear that they won't be believed when they come forward with something, that they won't have enough evidence, they won't have enough information to prove the thing that's happening to them. And another really big one that we hear about is fear of retaliation. So especially in an online space, if you are worried that if you say something, it's just going to escalate, you might not. Another really serious one for universities to take into consideration is and one of the most common answers we get when people say, like, why haven't they reported, is that nothing would be done about it. And really that is about demonstrating action that's taken as a result of disclosures and reports. Universities need to be communicating the outcomes of the issues that they're taking forward, and that will in and of itself encourage more people to speak up. Then I also wanted to touch on this idea of like informal action. I hate the term informal. I don't think there's anything informal about taking something seriously and doing something about it, but it's the term we use in all of our policies and processes. So I'm going to go with what's understood, but yeah, putting it out there, I don't like it. I think it's really serious when we take it on board. And so, you know, even if someone doesn't want to bring a formal complaint forward, conversations can still be had. And it's really important that leaders across universities address the concerns that are raised. If that's like, you know, saying something in an all-school meeting, saying we're aware that this particular issue is happening, and these are the ways in which you can come forward and talk to us more about it. Here's all the support that you can have available. Here's what we'll do if you come to us and give us the information, and making people feel that there is, you know, a seriousness about the issue that's at hand, and that these disclosures aren't just falling into a hole and being forgotten about. I'm also going to push the promotion and awareness of policies that state this particular behaviours that are happening. I see a lot of things in universities that use the term it or this happens, and it really bugs me because it's not descriptive. I think if you're talking about revenge porn, use the term revenge porn, don't shy away from it. And so, yeah, your policies need to name the behaviour specifically. They need to have clear definitions, and you need to use the language when you're communicating about them. Education and training is so vital. You know, as Emma's already said, not everyone has the same level of understanding, not everyone has the same level of exposure and experience, and so we shouldn't assume, and we should upskill everyone across the board, staff and students. And that includes intervention skills as well, because peers calling out one another's behaviours is literally proven to actually stop these behaviours from escalating and continuing. And then also, actually, in terms of community action, getting people to take part in a call to action. So signing up to something that says they'll do something about it, that collective responsibility, you have to build that. That just doesn't happen automatically. It doesn't happen because you write it in a policy. You have to spend time with people, having conversations that take them on a journey of understanding, and then get them to care about the issue and commit to it. And that takes time, money, and resources, which need to be given to this work. I have loads more I could say as well, but I'll stop there so we can get on to the questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Vicky. Thanks, everyone. Really helpful. I think we're now going to move on to the discussion part of the webinar. I can see there's lots of questions coming in already, but please do keep them coming and we'll try and answer as many as we can. So just thinking, I think, Emma and Vicky, particularly, you've touched quite a bit already on prevention, how universities can prevent online harassment, educate students. Do you have any thoughts about sort of how universities can teach students how to engage critically with online content, thinking about sort of things like Andrew Tate or sort of problematic speakers that lots of students might be being exposed to?
I'm happy to pick that up. And I think one of the ways to do that about getting students engaged critically is actually to embed some of this in the curriculum, right the way across the curriculum. It's not something that should be done just by student services or by a few posters. There's lots of ways which, whether it's history, through to teaching computer science, through to engineering, through to every subject, especially across all health courses, for example, there is lots and lots of ways that you can really critically engage students in some really good debates around this and get them to explore how they feel about it, and also understand the difference between legal content or harmful content. Students, and staff actually have got quite a poor understanding about that. So really having some really good discussions around that and not be frightened to shy away from it, but actually embed it in the curriculum, not have it something that's extracurricular and it's something that department do.
Just to build on that one, you hear about plenty of places where during induction week we'll do an hour on this. That's just like, they're coming from a school environment where they've had plenty of coppers coming in and doing plenty of assemblies about don't take pictures of your genitals because you'll be on the sex offenders register. So they very much engage with that sort of thing. It reminds me, because I am a bit of an old bugger now, of the conversation we were having around employability 15 years ago, where a university would go, we can't possibly put this into the curriculum because it will push out subject-specific content. These are fundamental life skills, critically thinking, understanding what you're seeing, the challenges of misinformation and things aren't something that is specific to the computer science guys or anything like that. It is something that impacts upon the goal of universities to produce liberally aware, educated students, regardless of the topic. But yeah, completely agree. It needs to be in the curriculum, and things like Andrew Tate, those sorts of things. What I'd suggest is you don't just rock up and go, look, Andrew Tate's really bad and you shouldn't, it's about taking a step back and talking about what influencers do and what the commercial side of those things, and take an objective perspective on it rather than try and take the emotion out of it. Because if you rock up and say Andrew Tate's bad, you're going to get some edgelords in the room going, well, I think he's great. But if you say this is a guy who's looking to make money off you, I can't remember the exact subscription fees for Hustlers University, but he's making a lot of money, and he's not doing it because he cares about you. He's doing, but those things around influencer models is something that really we should be looking at in schools before we get to universities. But there is a very strong role in universities to develop critical education around these sorts of things.
Thank you. Vicky, did you want to come in on that, or shall we move on?
I think these two have covered exactly what I was going to say. So yeah.
Great. Cool. And just sort of on that point about education, we've had a couple of questions in the chat about sort of how you engage students with training and sort of whether that should be mandatory. Would you say that kind of, if thinking about that, how to sort of get a broad buy-in from students, you would support a kind of curriculum delivery model that kind of engages all students? Yeah, could you maybe expand on that a little bit? Yeah.
Do you want me to go on that?
Yes, go on. That's kind of.
I think as well as a curriculum model, like it should be a continuation, like these shouldn't be one-off conversations. And that's the point to reiterate, is that there are too many programs where it's just, here's an online training at the beginning of the year, now you've understood it. And that's a compliance piece, not an education piece. Like actually ticking off that they've read it and having that signed removes the responsibility from the institution, but it doesn't denote deep learning and understanding and engagement with the topic. These conversations need to be happening at multiple intervention points. So yes, central services should continue to keep promoting these messages and putting out posters, but they should be embedded within curriculum, and they should happen progressively throughout someone's educational experience as well. And it's a real shame that university and school curricula doesn't progress from one to the other. They're so separate from one another. And yeah, these things should be a continuation. But unfortunately, because everyone's experience is so different, they'll have come from, it's a bit of a postcode lottery where you go, what you get taught when you're in school. So unfortunately, universities have to do a lot of that catch-up work. And I think, integration into curricula is the most guaranteed way for it to stick and to give you space and time to have those conversations in depth.
Thank you. Andy, were you looking to come in?
Yeah, please, can we not have an online video 10-minute Q&A about this that gets tacked on, as Vicky said, then we can tick the box and say all of our students have done their online safety training. And the other thing I would call for is, can we have this delivered by a specialist who know about this, rather than someone who's, I've got to do the employability module because I was told to by my line manager. We really don't want this. What I find is, if you can embed it in subject specific stuff. So I will go and do guest lectures to teacher trainees, social workers, lawyers, computer scientists, whatever. Invariably, some people will hang around at the end and go, can I just ask you about something that happened to one of my friends or something as well? So if you have people who are knowledgeable about this area delivering this stuff, you will open doors that maybe people didn't feel empowered to talk about before as well. But if you've got someone who is just rocking up and doing it because they've been told to by their line manager and their workload was light, you are not going to start opening those doors.
Yeah. When I worked at Goldsmiths and we did our responding to sexual violence disclosure training, we paired up with Rape Crisis because we knew that training would open up conversations, and we had a specific slot after the sessions, and these were all staff sessions, I should say. We did compulsory training, we called them briefings, they were 90 minutes. We got all staff in a room together in groups of like 70 to 100 people, which is way more than you'd be desirable, but it was the best way to get everyone through. But we made sure that there was like half an hour, 45-minute slot afterwards where someone from Rape Crisis was on hand to have those one-to-one conversations, because we knew they would happen, and they did inevitably every session.
Yeah, can I just say we had exactly the same experience. So we worked with the Revenge Porn Helpline. They came, they run a session, we got disclosures from staff, from students. It is about opening up those conversations and then being prepared to be able to safely handle those disclosures really effectively afterwards, and pairing up with specialist organisations is absolutely key to making it happen.
Thank you. Just thinking about sort of the role of not just university but other bodies in responding to this issue. We've had a couple of questions in the chat about the police, and sort of if you could comment a bit on when online harassment, online abuse becomes criminal, or at what point you would want to involve the police, and it sort of moves beyond a university matter.
I think it's perfectly reasonable. Again, it's about working in networks and not having, I've never spoken to a copper before, but let's give them a shout because something really bad's happened. If you establish these links already, you can have a conversation about thresholds, and you can have a conversation. So you don't have to only talk to the police if you think someone's done something criminal. I think it's working with them and reaching out to people. One of the things I think all three of us would probably say is, we don't sit there and go, we've got the answers to everything. There are people we will reach out to as well in various organizations as well. And I think sometimes there is a view that we need to solve this internally. Don't start the conversations early and be proactive about them. So the first conversation you have with the local police isn't, we've got this really bad case. And yeah, a lot of the time, if police can be preemptive about this, then it's saving them a lot of time as well. So they're happy to, provide input and support if this dialogue is open. But I mean, I can do more on criminal thresholds if you want, but I'm mindful we've got not a lot of time, so that might be better.
One thing I would say about the police is being victim survivor led. So actually giving them the option, letting them know what a police disclosure will mean, what that could lead to, and how and what support they could get as a result of it, and just giving them all of the information so they can make an informed decision about it. The other thing is building a relationship with the police can go both ways as well. So the police might actually inform you of things that would be useful for the campus or the university to know, to keep your students and staff safe. So sometimes, yeah, that can be tricky and complex because you're working across multiple police services as well. But yeah, I would definitely be victim survivor led and giving them as much information as possible.
I agree. And if a student does choose to disclose to the police, making sure that the university is well equipped to support that student through the journey and not just go, oh, it's now a police matter, we're washing our hands of it. That student is going to need support through that journey. We know, Andy and I frequently put in FOIs to various organisations. We know that, again, it is a real postcode lottery around how supportive the police are. And if your university is working effectively in partnership with your local constabulary, it will make a huge difference. So at the University of Suffolk, we have police representation sitting on a safeguarding board, and we have a really good rapport with our local force, but not all universities are that fortunate. So making sure that even if, the student does choose to go down that route, around following potential criminal proceedings, that the university is well equipped to continue to support that student, even though the investigation within the university may have already been concluded. The criminal one may take a lot longer. So really making sure that students are aware they can still access support.
Thank you. It's a really helpful point. So, and I think sort of possibly relevant to all forms of harassment, whether online or not. Thank you. Just sort of keeping on that point a little bit, when universities are thinking about their own investigation reporting and disciplinary processes, do you think there are additional considerations or sort of different steps to be aware of when you are specifically dealing with a case of online harassment?
Having the people running the disciplinary actually understand it would be a starting point. And I that sounds sarcastic, but I've been in sufficient numbers of student disciplinaries where someone from student services has gone, please, can you come and do something about this? Because, so I think that's a point to make there. I also think universities, it's boring, but you need policies, because if you don't have policies, you don't have consistency of response. And at least if you develop policy, you have at least had some discussions at reasonably senior levels within the university about how we do respond to this. So people should be able to go to it. I saw a thing come up in the chat a while ago about guidelines on the intranet and stuff. Yeah, absolutely. But having consistency of policy, Emma and I asked a lot of universities about their policies from time to time. And I think the last stats we looked at, we asked them to provide us with examples of policies that cover online harms. Of all the policies we were sent, only 40% had any mention of the word online in it. So kind of like, even if you don't know where your policies are addressing this, you're on a back foot immediately. So it's boring, but you really need to use that as a starting point.
Thank you.
Can I just say, make sure the people that are investigating are properly trained. I did hear of one university that got one of their IT lecturers in because it happened to be online, but they had very, very little understanding around sexual harassment. So, making sure that you've got a good number of staff in your university who've really done their investigations training and know, the principles are the same about being objective, being evidence-based. One thing about when it's online is also, helping students to support that, as in getting evidence, taking screenshots, knowing how to block, knowing how to report. So yeah, making sure that anybody undertaking an investigation has been properly trained.
Yeah, and I think not just those who are undertaking the investigation, but those on decision-making panels around that as well need to have an understanding of these issues, because we ask a lot of university staff. They are stretched, but on those panels you have student representatives, academics, heads of departments, and then professional services staff as well, and they all need to have a specific, a base level of understanding around this specific topic if they're being asked to sit on that particular panel. And you want a good pool of people to choose from as well, and so yeah, investing in supporting people who are doing the investigation and decision making. I'm actually about to I've written a blog as a think piece for the Institute of Advanced Studies at UCL around some of the issues around complaint and the kind of burden on university staff to deal with them. Over the last, since the Changing Cultures report came out, actually, there's been quite a shift in more disciplinary action being taken as a result of things coming forward. And that's really positive in terms of us seeing universities taking these things seriously. But are we properly investing in resourcing the teams that need to do that? Certainly, like, a lot of them have gone from doing hundreds of student complaints to all of a sudden hundreds of disciplinaries, and they're very different skill sets. And I think we just put too much pressure on those teams without enough support, guidance and training. And yeah, universities need to invest there.
Thank you. I could see a lot of questions coming through in the chat, and just to try and sort of lump a few together, I can see a few about sort of international students in the UK, but also when universities are working in international context, where there are kind of additional considerations for students who may have come from different cultures, where perhaps there are different understandings of what isn't acceptable in terms of online behaviour, or maybe kind of new to the UK, and if there's any reflections you have on that at all.
It's something to be mindful of, but universities have it within their gift to set their own thresholds. Essentially, you sort of go, "Oh, I know you've come from a different culture, therefore, if you set the awareness and you don't just assume people are coming with assumed knowledge," which comes back again to the fact that this should be delivered in the curriculum. I do think it is very much in the university's gift to decide what their thresholds around acceptable are, and they can frankly be significantly below legal if they want to be. I know there's often debates around freedom of expression and things, but I don't think freedom of expression has any relationship to free to abuse. So yeah, I think it does present extra challenges if we are assuming knowledge when they enter. But there is a role for universities to play there in terms of how come back again to education. We always come back to education. It's weird. Coming back again to the fact that if we just give them an hour or a 10-minute video, that's not sufficient.
No, but one of the things that we've done as a university, we have online modules for students before they join us. And that does include some of these issues. As Andy said, it's not about giving them a video or something in induction, or even that we don't assume that just because they've accessed this material and had this conversation before they join us, that it's done. But one of the things that we've found more and more, especially when we've done conversations with senior leaders or recruitment teams at conferences, they're saying, we're experiencing online harassment and sexual harassment of students before they join us on our campus. Where do we stand? Because they're not actually our students. So are they under our code of conduct? And I think that that's something that's an increasing problem for universities, is some of these cases are actually coming up before students have even joined them and enrolled and set foot on campus, especially in a digital environment where they're meeting each other in different forums, whether it's about way their student accommodation or different societies. So I think universities need to be really clear and state really clearly, as a university, we do not tolerate this. These are examples of it. This, and actually encourage students to access some of that thought and critical engagement with this before they join.
Yeah, and if you haven't already, have conversations about what your policies are around pre-enrollment action that you can take. We did at UCL because we saw exactly this. We got quite a lot of reports about individuals in WhatsApp groups in particular, we saw quite a lot of reports in sort of 2020, 21 around racism that's being perpetrated in WhatsApp groups, and that raised the conversation about, well, these people aren't our students already, but we actually were like, well, we do still have a responsibility. They are our offer holders, and have we written in their offer letters our expectations around their behaviour when they're interacting with the university in mind of coming, and how do you get that in writing? And your legal teams will be able to support and help you in that, but you should have it there so as you can do something about it, because that is a really common time for students to interact with one another and meet one another, and it's happening more and more in informal online spaces that we don't centrally manage.
Thank you. Yeah, a really important point. I think one we're hearing a lot about at the moment, the offer holders issue. So thank you. Just sort of trying to pick on a few more of the questions that have been coming through. I think there's quite a lot of interest in the idea of the kind of enthusiast model of dealing with harassment, which I think Andy or Emma mentioned before, and a few questions about sort of both how you can try and secure senior buy-in if that isn't currently there, and also how staff working on this issue can sort of emotionally protect themselves, given that often it may be those who are on the receiving end of a lot of this issue that end up having to do the heavy lifting. I think that's probably wider than just online harassment, but yeah, I think really pertinent questions. So yeah, I'm really interested to see what you think.
Sorry, go on, Em. Go on, you go first.
Have we lost
a named person on your leadership executive for safeguarding? And it was amazing how many universities did not. And we even had responses from universities saying, we're not required to have somebody on the senior leadership team for safeguarding because our students are over 18. So not only that, but there's massive misunderstanding across the sector. I mean, as I said, I'm really lucky. My university is, amazing. We have a lot of, we have named people on governing boards, executive and senior leadership team. But I think it is really, really important. Shouldn't just be a named person, but a really good understanding. And your other point about that staff welfare, we've got a duty of care to look after staff wellbeing. And that's why we put the training in place about handling disclosures, because part of that was looking after yourself and also knowing where to go to for support. So that needs to be part of that initial training around handling disclosures. Sorry, Andy, I'll leave it to you.
No, you're fine. You said half of what I was going to say anyway. In terms of senior management buy-in, I know there's some folk from OFS on the call as well. One thing we noticed in the school sector, it happened in 2012, was that there was a massive interest by senior managers in online safety in October 2012. Why was that? Because in September 2012, Ofsted announced they were going to inspect online safety in schools. Now, I know there's probably already some people going, we don't want an Ofsted for higher education. I'm not saying that, but wouldn't it be lovely to have a stick as well as some carrots to encourage some senior managers to reflect on whether this is important? We do get FOI responses, which basically will do anything to wriggle out of the fact that maybe senior management have a responsibility around safeguarding. And wouldn't it be nice if there were some more statutory levers to encourage them to engage with the statement of expectations? Because we've asked the sector about their responses to the statement of expectations, and in some cases they responded with, what's the statement of expectation?
I would like to add two things. One is the point around our students are over 18. Well, newsflash, they're not always. Loads of students come at 17 and they are likely to be your international students, which links back to the previous question. I don't always assume that international students are more vulnerable just because they're international students as well, I wanted to add. They may even come with more knowledge and higher expectations around what they should be experiencing and not. And so, yeah, I don't always like to equate like international students to the poor, vulnerable international student. Like they are a very varied group of people with very varied backgrounds and experiences and understandings. Most of them coming as postgraduates, so have probably been through higher education already. And so, yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. And the other thing coming back to around support for staff who are dealing with these issues, well, there should be specialist roles with managed workloads, and they should have regular supervisions. And for those that don't know what supervision is, it's a time to actually debrief and offload difficult content that you've heard.
Great. Thank you. Fab. I think we're sort of coming up to 10:45, so I won't ask for any more. I won't take any more questions, but what I will do, if it's all right, Vicky, Andy, I would just ask if you had any sort of last 30 seconds, minute reflections you just wanted to share with everyone based on what we've heard today and the questions you might have seen coming through.
I wanted to pull in a little bit about sort of marginalised groups and where people will connect with others online as well. And so like I think there's a big crossover, for example, say for the LGBTQ plus community, where they may meet other people who are like them online. And so online spaces are really valuable and important for people in creating that community and that connection. And actually therefore that can put people at like a risk of those spaces being where their friends are. And if they're excluded from those spaces, the risk of isolation just feels really big, and I just I wanted to sort of bring that in as an additional point I'd thought about beforehand but hadn't managed to say.
Thank you, that's a really important point. Andy.
I mean, we haven't talked much about legislation. There is the online safety bill bubbling up. It's not going to do anything to address anything in this area. It should be called the Regulation of Social Media Providers Bill. Instead, it's just government attacks on social media providers. They need to be leveraged, but not in the way they are trying to do it. But don't forget, we've got the Equalities Act. You know, it's very clear in the Equalities Act about attacking folk with protected characteristics is illegal. No one can hide behind free speech and go, oh, I can say that. I mean, it's very clearly defined in the Equalities Act around harassment and similar. The other thing I'd say, just to finish, is that I saw a few things in the chat. I'm not very good at multitasking, but they did pop up about who might do stuff. I'd suggest that, or who might provide training and similar. I suggest that Vicky's been talking massive sense all the way through this, and I'm sure she'd be happy for you to contact her organisation. Myself and Emma are always happy to receive emails as well. Although, given that Emma's a posh PVC and I'm but a jobbing academic, I generally reply quicker than she does.
Thanks for that, Andy. I think the one thing I'd say that, you know, people that have attended here today, go back to your HEIs, your universities, look at your policies. What are they? What do they say? Where is your statement of expectations? Does it include online? Is it well written? Is it well communicated? Ask some awkward questions. Ask who's responsible in your university and see what answers you get, because this is about getting the conversation going. The more people that will have these conversations, ask the questions, it's then we can get the dialogue going, and that's what makes the difference.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, everyone. I think some really useful things for people to take away there, and particularly I think it's always a good idea for universities to review their response to the statement of expectations, particularly as FS will be consulting shortly on making that regulatory. I think it's definitely in their interest to do that, and in students' interests as well. Right, I think we're feels like a bit of a whistle stop today, but it's got 10:45 very quickly, so I will stop us all there. But I just want to say thank you so much again to Andy, Emma and Vicky for joining us, and also to all of you for participating and asking so many really great questions. I'm sorry we haven't been able to get through all of them, but I hope it was useful and informative, and have useful things to take back to your institution. If you've enjoyed today, I'd really encourage you to register for our full Tackling Harassment conference taking place on the 22nd of March at Woburn House in London. There'll be some info about how to register going into the chat now, and we'll send you a follow-up email as well. And please do look out for more free UK webinars on other topics. You can sign up to the mailing list to find out more about what we'll be covering. And finally, feedback as well is always really important for us to improve our events, so do fill in the feedback form, which is also coming into the chat and sent out via email. So thank you again, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye.
Thanks.